In a world that's always racing forward, sometimes we need to slow down and reconnect.
Connect genuinely, broaden your perspective, and share your passion.
Bona Fide dialogues, where authenticity, creativity, and passion merge.
Welcome to Bona Fide Dialogues.
Thank you very much for having me, Christina.
Jay is the founder and president of Esquired, a premier education consulting firm where he supports law graduates preparing for the California bar exam through personalized tutoring programs. He also consults with law school faculty to enhance bar prep strategies and academic support, ensuring alignment with best practices and measurable learning outcomes. A pivotal experience in Jay's career was his role as a bar grader for the California bar, where he graded thousands of essay responses over multiple examination cycles. This experience gave him invaluable insights into the grading process, allowing him to refine his bar prep strategies and develop targeted approaches that address the real challenges students face. His unique understanding of the bar exam structure and grading criteria informs his work with law graduates, significantly improving pass rates through personalized programs. Jay's passion for legal education led him to key academic positions. As the Assistant Director and Acting Director of Bar Exam Services at Golden Gate University School of Law, he co-created and taught practical legal writing curricula that emphasized critical lawyering skills. He also taught and mentored at Santa Clara University School of Law, focusing on legal writing and bar exam preparation, guiding students through all stages of their legal careers. In addition to his work in legal education, Jay has represented indigent clients in complex criminal and juvenile appeals and has worked for The Hague at a United Nations ad hoc criminal tribunal established to prosecute war crimes. Jay is fluent in several languages and holds a JD from the University of San Francisco School of Law and a BA from New York University. He has served on the boards of Human Rights Advocates Incorporated and Bay Area Lawyers for Individual Freedom. He now lives in San Diego with his husband and 2 children.
Today's dialogue will focus on the impact of AI on the California bar exam and the legal profession as a whole. We wanted to focus on AI mostly, but because so much happened in the last week, I think this is where we need to start.
Oh yes, I think your viewers will see that there's a lot of attention on the California bar these days. It has been in flux for a good long time in terms of transitions to what it's really desired to be, which is a licensing test to test one's lawyering skills as a first-year associate or a first-year practitioner. And for many years, of course, the bar exam has been uh, under the gun about, not really truly testing what lawyers do. And there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. I myself graded the bar, so I have a far better understanding. And what I do is I try to dispel myths about the bar exam, especially in terms of the California bar. Now, what was not very helpful to the bar exam's cause, not that I ever promoted the bar exam as the best opportunity for assessing a new lawyer's skills, was this past week. This past week, they had transitioned. Well, let's roll back a little bit. In the last few months, it came out that the state bar was running into some financial problems and needed to stay solvent. And one of the best ways to do that was to stop administering the bar exam itself, meaning writing the questions itself, grading the questions itself, and opening up different forums for test taking, big test taking centers like convention centers throughout the state of California, and to outsource that to a private company. They did hire Kaplan Bar Services, and so now Kaplan, which no longer is allowed to provide services in California because it is now administering the California bar exam, is in charge of writing questions, and they're phasing in the kind of questions that they're writing, multiple choice as well as written questions. It also means that the state bar needed to find a service provider for, where the bar taker is going to take the exam. And so now it's an online exam, whereas it wasn't before. And with the online rollout, it meant that everything was left up to a company called Measure Learning, and they provided some testing centers for where bar takers could go if they wanted to do their online bar exam on their computers or to do them at home and be proctored remotely.
That's a
And there were
huge change.
It's a huge change from writing it in a big convention center like, in Pasadena or in Oakland, or the Cow Palace in San Francisco, to an online environment where you're in your own room or with a few other people, and you're proctored remotely or in person, and then there are glitches that happen that wouldn't happen if you were to do it on paper. And those unfortunate situations happened. There were major rollout problems.
So more than 4,000 people signed up. Around 900, I don't know the exact numbers, dropped out right away. The main
That's
reason
absolutely right.
there was a lot
Yeah.
of uncertainty. What
There
to
was a ton of
expect,
concern.
right?
Yes, there was. They were trying to take a mock bar exam, and the mock bar exam revealed limitations as to what the software could offer and what it didn't. And so that created a lot of cold feet for bar takers. And, it was well justified, as we can now see with the debacle that ensued with the real testing.
Several years ago, we had 3-day bar exam.
Mm-hmm.
Then at some point it changed to 2 days. And California
That's
bar exam always has been the hardest bar exam in the country, right? The passing rate was extremely low, like around 40%, and please correct me if I'm wrong. And
uh-huh.
compared to other states, around 80% passing rate. So there are a lot of issues with that exam that needed to be addressed, right?
That's right.
To
Yes.
begin with.
Pre-2017, the bar exam was a 3-day event where 2 days of it would be related to writing, and which is called the essay portion and the performance test portion. And one of those days was an all-day multiple choice question format. And these were all on laptop, and the writing portion was on laptop, and the MBE portion, which is also known as the multi-state bar examination, the multiple choice portion of the questions of the bar exam, was on a Scantron sheet. So 2017, they needed to, they've been dealing with these financial issues and had a reevaluation as to where we can save some money as far as the bar is concerned. And so they brought it down from the same testing format, but down to 2 days. So there would be a 1 day for the written portion, the essays and the performance tests, and then 1 day for the 200 multiple choice questions. Then they realized that somewhere down the road that, the bar exam does need to change for a variety of reasons. It's been under the gun. It is a very difficult exam. And, what California had been doing was somewhat different than what other jurisdictions do. In California, they had been writing their own exam when it came to the writing because they wanted to test certain skill sets that of the bar applicants, of newly minted lawyers, that it appeared that were not adequately being tested by the bar exam in the uniform bar exam jurisdictions. And there are many states that follow the uniform bar exam. However, California does not. And it was very much an intentional decision not to follow the uniform bar exam as far as the writing component goes, but share the same content for the multiple choice questions until this past year. So as of February 2025, the California bar exam is no longer the written portion is no longer the written portion is still written by California, And in July 2025, the written portion will be written by Kaplan. Uh, in February 2025, the multiple choice questions do not come from the multi-state bar exam, the multiple choice questions that had been used before, but have been written by Kaplan. And that is how it's going to move forward for the July exam and moving forward. Now, not only is the content somewhat changing because the author is different, it's going to be written by Kaplan as opposed to California, the state of California, under license. It is also going to be it's all online. And this has caused a lot of concern and this has included some concern for me because there's certain skill sets that one really is able to demonstrate in taking the bar exam when they're working with hard copies, when they're working with really looking into the facts of a client type of situation and assessing and analyzing how things should go. And it's very difficult to do that on your little laptop. And imagine working through 16 pages of documents for the performance test. And you're going to have to scroll through all those documents and assemble an answer, a legally sound answer
Under
from
the
there
time pressure, yeah.
and under time pressure and just noting that this is going to be the mother of all exams for you. There's a lot that just doesn't come to the table. And so that's caused a lot of extra stress for bar takers. Now, given the fact that they were glitches in their ability to say copy and paste from those documents into their final answers, that there was a lot of lag time that the bar takers face. That just exacerbated the whole thing and drew a lot of media attention around the limitations of even non-AI technology
Exactly.
uh, testing this exam.
Yeah, it's interesting how I wanted to discuss AI and we're still dealing
We're
with
not even dealing with that
simple
on this.
technology issues. This is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. It's unprecedented, right? I mean, we would have never heard of this even a year ago, that the bar would just not have it together on its most uh, important exam. And it's quite shocking in a sense to many of us. And there are lawsuits that are ensuing from this.
Absolutely understandable. It impacts so many people. You know, some of them won't be able to get a job
That's right.
because you have
There's
to be licensed attorney.
That's right. On a personal level, they face a lot of difficulty in preparing for this exam. This isn't an exam that you just, take one day. You prepare for it 2, 3 months in advance in most cases. And that means that you put your life on hold. Many bar takers have dependents, families, children, parents, spouses who count on them as primary support. They have their own self-care to deal with and other issues that they came in with in spite of self-care that they've been trying to do. So it's a major sacrifice. It's deferring jobs. I advise strongly that in a perfect world, if you were to prepare for the bar exam, that you wouldn't be holding down a job at the same time, that you would be able to find a leave of absence or whatnot. And then there's also the financial expense of taking the bar exam. To take the exam, it's over itself. It costs them, I forget. Yeah, I don't keep tabs as to how much it costs them to take the exam, but it's
Extensive
roughly around
exam.
like a
Yeah,
thousand
but
dollars. Yeah, to just
and
take
then
the
most
exam.
people take this bar exam prep course,
Of course,
right?
yes. And it's almost unheard of to not take some form of bar exam prep
Which
course,
costs
which
thousands of
is in the
dollars.
thousands. Yes. And that's because of the kind of uh, detail that needs to go into all of this and planning
And you
for
want to
the
go into
preparation.
this exam with everything fresh in your mind. Then you
You
dive
do.
into this preparation stage, right? Then you're going to take this exam, and your mind, it's like a computer. If you have to put it on hold and retake it in July, right? You have to kind of do it all over again.
There's a mental preparation. There are certain things that, are what I like to call skill development, where, once you learn to ride a bike, you shouldn't have to relearn it very much. But then there are other things that come from that are relegated to your short-term memory. And that, with the volumes of rules that you're going to need to keep in mind
Yeah.
to apply to the bar exam, well, you're not going to remember every last rule as it is. And then again, if you have to take it again, there's a lot of resetting, like you're saying.
Yeah, refresh your mind.
Yeah. And so it's a major, I like to look at it as a separate chapter from law school. It's a major chapter in one's professional development. There's, you go to college, you go to law school, and then you sit for the bar exam, which in many cases can take multiple attempts. Not unheard of for as you were saying, the bar pass rate to be low and for many to have to retake this time and time again. And they can take it as many times as they can and want, but there are so many considerations around that.
Yes, it's unfortunate. I feel very sorry for people who planned taking this exam in February and had to drop out. And
That's
for
right.
those that took this stressful exam to begin with, experienced technical issues, and now will have to retake. I
As
don't
of this date, they're still, trying to figure out the appropriate remedy for the kinds of situations that have happened. And, the issues that
reimburse
one bar
for their
taker
exam,
faced.
right?
Yeah, whether it is to psychometrically take care of that through their scaling system, whether it is to allow them to retake the exam even in 2 weeks based on the
Mm,
gravity of their situation with the same questions. So there's an ethics relating to that as well.
absolutely.
How are you going to give them a second bite at that apple when, and perhaps, others who didn't face as many of those challenges who are otherwise strong, but now are going to be compared to them. How are they going to deal with that? And again, there's probably a psychometrical component to that as well. It's quite a complicated exam. It's going to be a complicated solution in terms of what they do. But whatever it is, it better happen quickly, because, they're dealing with the future
People's
of,
lives, yeah.
yeah, yeah, of thousands of individuals.
And I like that you mentioned the fact that people put on hold their lives just to prepare for the bar exam. Then the exam is the most difficult exam, arguably, in the country. It's already a stressful event that requires a lot of time, energy, preparation. And in addition to that, the fact that you have to retake it,
Yeah.
it's another
And you don't spend
level
any
of
less time with it. Oftentimes, when you retake it, you don't spend any less time. In fact, I work with quite a few repeaters, and they go through bar prep the first time almost in a way not knowing what they really should know. And obviously, you see that it manifests in the fact that they didn't pass the exam. But they go in, spend 2 months there, and I say, nope, things were done wrong. Let's do it the right way. And that's going to take 2 months or 3 months, depending on your skill level, where you are. But yeah, it's a total restart in terms of time and money. There's a lot at stake for every bar taker, and and we see that that is having a major economic impact on them and their families, and of course, emotional. First and foremost, it's a grueling exam
it's interesting that you're saying the reasoning behind all these changes is financial issues
for
that,
the state bar.
yeah,
Yes.
for the state
Uh-huh.
bar.
Yeah.
However, I was looking at some articles and it seems like they paid more than $4 million to this vendor,
Mm-hmm.
and
They did.
it's a lot of
Um,
money.
it is a lot of
Something is
money.
wrong with the system, it seems like.
Yes. Yes, it appears there to be, and it seems like their challenges are not haven't come to an end just by simply handing over the administration of the bar exam over to someone else. You know, it's a form of privatization. And with privatization, you can find some efficiency, and that was the whole idea. However, if there isn't some sort of continuity of how the regulatory body had been doing things in this particular case, and taking it to ensure that that same sort of standard is being applied uh, moving forward, and bringing in the lessons learned, even from the way they did it, you're going to see problems. And I feel that there it was a lot of opportunity on a variety of levels to address those problems preemptively. And I think that is pretty much the consensus. You can see this in the letter signed by 20 law school deans. And, you know, there was quite a bit of foreseeability in this
Can you tell us
situation.
about this letter?
Yes. So there was a letter written just maybe a couple of days ago, signed by the law school dean, stating, of course, that this is unacceptable and demanding some remedial measures that are coming out soon, and demanding remedial measures for the bar takers. Now, I haven't read through the final draft of this letter, but I could expect it to include things that account for, financial redressability as well as other sort of score adjustments, if not just something more generous than that. But there are going to be there is a lot of uh, outrage on the part of the law schools in what had happened, and
The way it
rightfully
was
placed.
handled, yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like they wanted to make too many changes too fast.
Yes,
They should
too many
have
changes
taken
too fast.
some, step-by-step approach,
Yeah, you're
right?
exactly right. It was too many changes too fast, and it was almost an impossible task. But I think it was driven by the pressures of the financial standing of the institution. And so that pressure really kind of was overwhelming for them on a certain
I
level,
didn't
and it
know
proved to
that,
be.
yeah. I thought
Yeah.
they're just trying to improve the exam, make it better.
Well, there was that
But
too. Yes. And so what happened with that? That's a separate question in and of itself. So they were already looking into how to make this exam more relevant to what lawyers in practice would be dealing with, and also how it could be a more of an equitable exam, given that, it is more attorneys are diverse, and what it means in terms of being a lawyer in today's age, including with AI. There are so many considerations there. And it seems like those more nuanced considerations were put on hold at this point in time because of the overwhelming financial considerations that they faced.
I'm sorry to hear that. Of course, I'm glad you're there to help some of the
Yes,
bar
I
takers not just take their exam, but to manage this process in this situation. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your company.
Yeah, so what I do with Esquire DeBar is I provide services to that speak to the all the skill sets that are involved with the bar exam. And those are the hard skill sets, the ones that we would expect the bar exam to test, and which I understand from my service as a bar grader for many years, if you might remember.
I remember,
And
yeah.
also
I,
and
I'll,
also
as you mentioned, I'll tell them that we were working at the same law firm in downtown San Francisco. And I remember I used to go for a walk during our lunch break. It was safe in San Francisco years ago.
yes, it was.
But I remember you staying during your lunchtime grading bar exam.
Yeah. I used to carry boxes full of hundreds of real bar papers and stayed in my workspace and just graded them
To me,
as I
it was
went
always
through.
concerning. I thought, okay, I know Jay, he's very objective, but the process was always surprising to me. I'm thinking, what if there's an attorney who is grading those exams and he just had a bad meeting, you know? How would that affect the grade? Because it may become subjective, you know?
Well, when a human is grading, you're going
Yeah.
to, there's inherently going to be some level of subjectivity. You can't possibly remove 100% of subjectivity. However, I will tell you that when I was a bar grader and the state bar handled the entire bar exam from the drafting phase to the grading and to and that's the behind the scenes stuff aside from the administration of the exam. When it came to my component of it, they really beat the subjectivity out of us as best as they possibly could. They have very sophisticated ways in their calibration sessions that are quite subtle in terms of how we needed to harmonize our grading of the exam.
Mm.
And I feel that it almost was a science that they had developed around this.
Interesting.
And I feel like they went down their own path as opposed to following those jurisdictions that went in for the uniform bar exam because simply they knew that they were able to they had certain learning competencies that they were looking for in these answers. They were looking for certain skill sets to be demonstrated, certain type of knowledge, and there was a certain way that the bar grader would be invested in every answer and be able to assess objectively what they needed to be looking for.
The
And
training for the bar graders were really good.
it
That's what
was very rigorous and it was, I would say, at the time it was top notch. And they had been doing things this way for years, in fact, decades. And it worked really well, but it proved to be an ex expensive process.
mm,
So hence they kind of have moved over onto allowing Kaplan to do that. Now, whether they do it to the same level of sophistication, that's to be seen. Starting with the July 2025 exam when it comes to the written portion of the bar exam. But I
but do
actually
we know
enjoyed
how they
doing them.
plan to handle this part? Do we know if they were going to
No, and
hire
that's not subject to
professional
public
graders or
information.
what's going to happen? Do we know what to
Yeah,
expect?
that's a good question. They don't just share this information with the public. I think they do, indirectly with law schools. And it depends on what level of transparency they want to have. And, it'd probably be in their best interest to be more transparent as time goes
Absolutely.
on,
Absolutely.
especially with, the fact that they had been under the gun about what they're testing and how this particular exam turned out. And this will go down in history as, a blemish on their record. And I think that's one way that they could possibly see themselves doing right by future bar applicants and the sacrifices that they've made.
Yeah, it's
So,
like some experiment, you know?
yeah, it is. There are bar takers do feel that they've been experimented on. I've seen those words used. I've seen the words guinea pigs used in various social forums,
Yeah.
and
Seems unfair to people.
they
Absolutely.
do feel that they have, really been placed in a position that they shouldn't have been, and I think that the state bar agrees with that. They've issued an apology so far, so recognizing at least some level
Responsibility.
of responsibility around all of this, yes. But traditionally, the bar exam, I think to kind of go back to something that you pointed out, it is a difficult exam and it does have low pass rates, and we want to know why. Why is it so difficult, And I think there are a few easy answers to this. From what I've seen, being on it from multiple sides when I was a bar taker myself from when I was a bar grader for multiple cycles and reviewing thousands of essay answers and seeing what bar takers had put together, and from my time as a professor and my time now as a bar tutor. Basically, I've lived and breathed this. From what I see is that there's a misunderstanding of what is being tested on the bar exam.
Mm.
Even among my colleagues in law school, many law professors think that the bar exam is nothing more than a memorization exam. That, as long as you know the law in 12 to 13 subjects, that you should be fine and be able to pass the bar exam. And the way that the bar prep system is set up is that we have big bar companies that focus on that, which is let's present the law to the bar takers, the bar that they're going to be, the law that they're going to be tested on, and our job is done. We should be good with that and let them memorize this. We will grade a few essays to see how they do, and let's just kind of take it to the bar exam. And then what do we see? The result of that misunderstanding is low bar pass rates because, of course, the students of those companies, the students of from the law schools, trust that that is what it entails. And unfortunately, that's only a fraction of the story. Sure, you're going to need to know the law as a lawyer. You sure, and it's not the same law that you're going to be practicing necessarily, but you're going to need to know some law. So we need some vehicle to test your lawyering skills on. But there's an inattention to the lawyering skills that are tested on the bar exam. And we know as lawyers what skills get tested on the bar. I mean, there's a variety of skills. But what are some of those hard skills that are tested? Well, number one, it's got to be about what you got to have an understanding of the law. You have to understand how the law works, right? You have to understand hierarchies of authority. You have to understand, why do we talk about certain rule or legal concepts in certain situations, but not in others, to really have that understanding of your law knowledge, right? A knowledge of law. The second piece to this is law application, is how well you deal with the facts of a client. So when you're dealing with the facts of a client, you're asking yourself, can I see the client's problems? And what are the client's problems? We call that in the law issue spotting, right? Can you spot the issues that the client is facing? Now, that is a place where a lot of bar takers just simply go wrong. They just look at a factual scenario. So an essay or even a multiple choice question will give you a scenario that a hypothetical client would be facing, and they would just look at it for maybe 5, 10 minutes and try to figure out what are all the issues that the client would be facing, the legal problems. But the trick is, what makes the bar so difficult is that they don't really, or seemingly difficult, is that you have to spot all the problems that are arguable that the client is facing. Can you think of anything that you can argue that could be a problem? So when you're trying to figure out an issue, you got two problems there. You got to know the full scope of issues, the full scope of problems that your client could be facing. And then you have to assess the arguability of that. How am I going to, you know, when should I bring it up? Or when should I be quiet and don't bring that up as a problem? You could make lawyers are known, right, for making problems out of nothing. But when does it pass a straight face test of spotting of this is an actual problem? And when would you be laughed out of court if you argued that as a legal issue for which someone should get, um, you know, receive a remedy of some sort of compensation, perhaps. So that's a big deal. This is something that lawyers face no matter whether they're working with in a litigation setting, whether it's a transactional setting, whether you slice it as civil law versus criminal law. What are we as lawyers but problem solvers? So if we're going to solve a problem, we should be able to see problems in the first place, right? So that is working with the client's facts in the abstract. And then There's legal analysis, as you know, right? So once you've seen the problem, what rules, what law applies to this problem? And can we take that applicable law and put it to the client's facts? Can we create arguments out of why things should be seen one way or another? Can we look at things objectively when we're asked to look at it objectively? Can we look at it persuasively? Can we relate it to things that happened before? Lawyers, we live in in the United States, our jurisdictions are a common law system. Common law means that, judges can make law, and we look at the scenarios that the judges in the past have dealt with, and we make analogies to them and say, well, if it worked out in that case in that way, we should use that as case precedent and see how it works out this way in our situation. And so we use that case precedent to bolster our client's case. And we need to do that. That's what we do at common law. It happens in a variety of areas of law. So that's a skill set that is tested on the bar exam, believe it or not. But and then there's a third set of skills that I call law expression. How do you put it all together? How do you make your point? In law school, we're taught a certain way to put together a legal analysis. We first identify the issue, we then state the law on it, and then we analyze each element distinctly and judiciously to come to a conclusion as to how that problem would be settled. And that's called IRACing, the issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. So, there's that. And then there's also on the macro level, how you organize your answer and say, okay, there's a reason for why I first talk about this concept as a threshold matter before moving forward with this concept and then that. There's a logic to my organization. Bar graders are looking for that as well. So those are the kind of skills that, many bar takers pay no attention to. There are others who inherently understand this coming in and combine that understanding of the skills of how to work with the facts of a case, how to organize an answer with their knowledge of the law that they're given from big box bar companies and are able to succeed with that understanding. But you need that understanding in order to succeed at the bar exam. And then those are the hard skills. And then what does it take otherwise? Confidence is a major issue. Imagine this being the mother of all exams you've taken, you're going to feel a bit intimidated. And how do you confront a scenario where there's a factual scenario relating to a hypothetical client's case and you draw a blank? What do you do with that? That the pressure kind of can get to them, and it does quite a bit. It's called choking. We know that it happens with athletes and other high functioning individuals. And, burgeoning lawyers are no exception to that, unfortunately.
It's interesting that you're talking about the challenges that bar takers face in the regular scenario about all the issues that we discussed earlier. And the problem is you're saying they're going into this exam without really understanding what's being asked from them. Because I'm sure there's more than this issue. So where's the problem? Here in California, we have 40% passing rate. You're talking about people that spend 7 years studying, 4 years of college, 3 years of law school, highly intellectual individuals that are inspired to become attorneys and help people and fight for justice. And here they are, after paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for their education, after spending 7 years, in college and law school. And now most of them cannot pass California bar exam. And
where does the responsibility lie?
That
Yeah.
seems very strange, right? If you think about common sense, that doesn't make sense. So I see one issue you just identified, for us is the fact that they're not really prepared to take the bar exam, even though there's a huge industry, those bar prep courses that charge thousands of dollars, and people still don't pass that exam. I'm sure there may be 10% of people that, like you said, got scared at the exam, like, or didn't feel well, or really didn't prepare and took their time to review everything they studied in the law school. Of course, that would be 10%. Okay, maybe
Yeah,
20%, but not 60%. So
you're right.
I like
Yeah.
that you identified one issue that there's not they're taking exam without knowing what to expect, and they just come out shocked. What just happened? seven
What
years
just
of
happened?
education, right? 7 years of
Yeah.
education, bar exam courses, hundreds thousands of dollars, and now I have
And
all these loans. What do I do? I have to wait another 6 months to retake it, and there's no guarantee I'm going to to pass it. That
that's,
sounds like a nightmare,
it
So
does sound like a
what else?
nightmare.
Maybe we can focus on issues
Yes.
that need to be changed, because it seems like the California bar trying to make changes, trying to make it better, but it went down the hill. We
It
already
did.
need to fix all these issues, right? And now it's got even worse. What do we do?
I totally agree with you. So what we are talking about is skill building. So technically, if you're looking at it from an educator's perspective, what the bar exam is what is called a summative assessment. It's an assessment of all the things, of all the learning competencies, of all the things that I just described, the law knowledge, the law application, the law expression, that you should have developed over time from your from first year of law school, basically moving forward in terms of how to work with a client. And and it doesn't start in bar prep. This is something that needed to start at the nascent stage of where we come in with the law. And this could even be with pre-law programs,
Mm.
But generally speaking, this is something that we should have expected to develop through 3 years, or some of us go through 4 years of law school to develop, and then say, okay, well, I've developed all of those skill sets and to the place where I could demonstrate it on this bar exam. Now, does that necessarily mean that the bar exam has it right? That those are all the skills that a lawyer is going to need. No, for many
We're not
years, the
gonna
bar,
say it's all law schools. Law schools don't prepare students for the bar exam. That's
they
it.
prepare for
Bar
law
exam is
practice.
fine, right? That's the
Yeah,
law schools. But
they
what
ought
you
to,
are saying, yes, there's some issues with the way we're teaching our law students. Maybe we're focusing too much on analysis and not much of on the other skills that you just mentioned. But there's a second issue that you just started to describe is actual bar exam, right? The testing
yes.
part of it is not
That's right. Yeah.
part of
The-
it.
Basically, the way that I see it, it's an arc of learning. So you come into law school, you start to develop the what it means to be a lawyer, how you argue like a lawyer, how you spot issues like a lawyer. And in law school, we do this through the Socratic method, typically, which means that through some very nuanced question and answer dialogue between the professor and their students, they start to really think between the lines in the way that you would hope a very good lawyer would. And they start to develop these skill sets by examining it case by case and going through subject by subject and determining, why do you think that the court found this way in this situation? Why do you think this is the law? That sort of thing to kind of get their analytical juices flowing. There is great utility to teaching that way, and it's been taught that way for well over 100 years, from all the way from the top law schools and all the way down to the access law schools as well, This is how law school is taught, and it has traditionally been taught. And so to really develop those critical thinking skills, there's a divide in that arc of learning when it comes to understanding the bar exam's place in all of this as a summative assessment. The bar exam, including from many law professors, is considered to be a bad way to assess one's skills that I just described. And it's not the perfect way. There are problems with it, but the intent of it is to be able to do that. And I can tell you that from having graded the exam, and being on that side of the equation and seeing how summarily they are trying to test of those critical thinking skills, particularly of the issue spotting and the analysis. And that the law that is taught in law school is designed to be simply a vehicle for demonstrating those skill sets. So it's important for us to kind of look at the bar exam's place in legal education as a place of saying, okay, we've come to the point where the skill sets have reached a certain level of what they define as minimum competence before you can then take those skills on in the practice of law. But if you don't see the bar exam like that, then you're going to and deride it as just simply a test of your knowledge and nothing more. And then the students believe that. And then the bar prep companies reinforce that by only focusing on the law, then you're not going to get the outcomes that are desired.
And the law
And
changes.
and there's a lot of finger pointing at the end of the day. The law schools point the fingers to the bar and say you're too hard, you're unreasonable, you're not testing on the right things. And then the bar points back to the law schools
You're
where you're
not
not
teaching
preparing
the
your
right
students
things. Yeah.
enough, right? And then everyone starts blaming the students taking the bar
Yeah.
exam. And so it becomes a mess. And when each of these actors is imperfect, including the bar exam itself. So in 2020, the state bar decided to take a real look at itself again in terms of the bar exam. They came together in terms they called it the Blue Ribbon Commission on the Future of the Bar Exam. And they did a massive report on what it means to be a lawyer and what a bar exam, an effective bar exam should test. They came out with so many different things besides the ones that I talked about in terms of the hard learning competencies, law knowledge, law application, law expression. They came up with other, they interviewed lawyers and judges and talked to them about what is it that they're seeing in terms of their own work and what they're seeing in terms of new lawyers and what they would have hoped that they would have seen in the abilities that and the knowledge and the skills that new lawyers should have. And they
That's
came up with a
great.
whole
Sounds great.
host of things. It did sound great. And those things included things like, client counseling and negotiating. These are things that really aren't tested much on the bar exam.
Mhm.
Your ability to, keep your client's confidences, and other ethical uh, uh, components to that are tested and then really subtly are not tested on the bar exam. How do you deal with, exercising this sort of judgment with the certain skill sets where, you might have to balance that against your client's desire to not share information for fear of sort of retribution and things like that. Those are not tested on the exam. So there's a lot that is tested, or even transactional skills. The bar exam is very much a litigator's exam. If you kind of really examine it, it's designed for people who would be happy to be in the courtroom. But many lawyers don't ever do that and never see a courtroom. They're transactional lawyers. They deal with contracts between companies and they don't have to deal with the same kind of skill set. So how are we going to manage those skill sets? So there was this great evaluation that was done and a drive toward making it more relevant to the legal professions. I would put that in plural because there's so many flavors of being a lawyer.
Absolutely.
And then decided that they would kind of revamp the bar with all these things in mind and use of technology included, proficiency and all of that. And then suddenly seems to have lost sight of that report that they had been working on and had been a major subject for many years, and then went this way with the bar exam suddenly this past year. And who knows how they plan to bring that back, once the dust, if the dust settles. But there was an intention at a certain time to change what
Make
this
it
exam
better.
looks
Yeah.
like and make it more, yeah, reflective of what it means to be a lawyer, what it means to represent people in a diverse state like California, and with different needs and responsibilities, evolving responsibilities.
We identify that there are issues with legal education, there are issues with actual bar exam.
Hmm.
Is there anything else? What can we do to make it better? I know you have been working in this field for so long. So, and I don't expect you to have all the answers, but I think a person like you would have the best advice. What should happen? Like in the perfect world, if you have this magic wand, how do you think it should look?
That's a great question. I've given, of course, I've been giving that a lot of thought over time, over all these years. What would I have done differently here? I would have done it differently
We
from
all
the
know how
beginning.
to criticize, right?
We all know how to
Like,
criticize, yes. That's part of the human spirit. And to know how things could have been done differently and better. And in my opinion, it would have been really about taking this look as to what it means to be a lawyer collaboratively, not just by the state bar through the Blue Ribbon Commission in 2020, but way back when law school became a recognized and respectable, as I think it's respectable, profession, where basically we're looking at what it really means and treating those and defining what we call in education learning outcomes. What is it all that we want to see out of a lawyer who is ready to practice law and after the bar exam? What are we looking for here? Well, I think having well-defined learning outcomes that a common language that we can speak in terms of in terms of the law, in terms of the skill sets that we want to see, in terms of the abilities to interact with clients, and to define them collaboratively, the state bar with law schools and the American Bar Association and the accrediting agencies in different states and say, these are the terms that we're talking about. This is everything that we want to see in terms of what a lawyer should be able to do once they are done with law school. From there, you start at different benchmarks. You go through law school with the development of each of these learning outcomes. This is what happens in lower education, right? We call these common core standards, if you will. So common core standards were established to say, what is it we're all talking about here? What do we want to see out of children who graduate up until and to earn their high school diploma? And then what do? We work backwards. We create different benchmarks for kindergartners versus sixth graders versus 12th graders, right? There's going to be different levels of aptitude in these realms. And so there isn't such language in the bar world, in the legal education world that we can all work with. A standardization of this sort of language, and then be able to then give assessments, teach and assess at each individual level from orientation in law school through first year, second year, and also share it with legal professionals who are working with law students in their internships throughout their summers and externships with judges. Language that we all can actually speak and make easily relatable so that we can really tell our law students and our bar takers, this is where we're going. This is where we're struggling with you, and this is what we want to develop with you, and then take it to law practice. That could even eliminate for a bar exam if we actually were able to do that and really identify these competencies, and that all we needed to do is to present a portfolio of information showing that this is what we have done over time and how we have developed, and now we're ready to practice law. Would we need a bar exam even in that situation? I don't even think so. So there's a novel way to look at this, but because there are so many stakeholders here, and often directly conflicting interests, I don't think we're going to see that happening anytime soon. But if I were to have a magic wand, it would be to create those competencies and speak to each of them at every stage to varying degrees until we say, yes, this person is ready to fly and practice law. So that's the way that I would have done it. But there's so many historical reasons, and I think it would create more of an equitable situation because not all of us have even started off with that kind of footing, right? There are some who are legacy students who have parents who are lawyers who come from a whole line of lawyers, and then for some of us, we just are first generation lawyers, and we're like excited about what it means to be a lawyer. And we're eager and to say, hey, let me show you, I want to be a part of this and I want to help. I want to be a contributing, very effective person in society who will really change the way, that we as a culture, as a society, interact with the law. And these are many opportunities that we could have that, I feel that up until this point, we have largely missed.
Taking into consideration everything that happened in the last 2 weeks,
Hmm.
now you and your students need to adapt. Do you have a plan?
Of course, you always got to have a plan. We planned for this even before. We practice through, I practice with my students through all sorts of scenarios. And what we do is we say, first of all, we speak the same language. I present to them what are these skill sets that are being tested of you. It's not just about memorizing law, so put that away. That's just your vehicle, right? That we're going to be using. So let me supply that in a nice, succinct way for you to not have to kind of re-engineer in any particular way. And let's focus on the skill sets that they're really looking for. So my job is always to get their buy-in on that. And I prove it to them because you know how lawyers work. They need to see proof that your methods work. So we work through it from that angle, from the skills angle. Can you see all the problems, big and small? Can you analyze? Because that's what you're going to have to do for a client. These are the skills currently tested on the bar. Now, you're going to have to deal with the changes to the bar. So we're going to have to show those skills in light of the limitations that you're going to have. Like, the state bar doesn't share with me as a private entity what they're doing, but they share it with the bar taker. So I collaboratively say to them, tell me what they're telling you so I can help you in turn. If you're telling me that you're allowed to draw information in this way on your screen, or that they're telling you that they're going to do that, we're going to work with that assumption
Those
and adapt,
skills. Mm-hmm.
yes, and work through those skills in that particular way. So we're always trying to keep our ear to the ground and to understand what the worst case scenarios, and we also work on those soft skills as well. You've got to be able to handle the pressure of taking the exam. So, do I go easy on them? No. Am I as generous as I was with them when I actually graded the bar exam? No. Because I know that they're more generous with themselves in other ways. They're not taking the bar exam, so the stakes don't run so high when you're doing something in practice. So let me light some fires. That's my style. So, and that's, how you get results is by putting challenging in various ways where you can see that come rain or shine, you're going to perform in the way that you are intended. So fortunately, I had a lot of good news with how my students were able to handle technical difficulties,
And this
as
is
opposed
no
to bad news.
different. This is no different from actual real life
Life,
situation. Things happen.
things
You
happen.
were working on a memo for several hours and then something happened with your computer and you have
Deleted.
your
Yeah.
deadline. Yes, so
Yes.
it's no different. You have to be able to, take a deep breath, restart, and just refocus and
That's
have it
right.
done, right?
Yeah. It's a high pressure environment as a lawyer and oftentimes and no one's just going to throw you a bone and you just got to have to figure out how you're going to deal. And yeah, I mean, there are situations where, we're really pushed to our capacity. And so I encourage my students, like, talk to me. Let's call me if something happens to you. And yeah, I got a couple of panic calls, but the idea is to really just keep in mind what you have control over at the end of the day and work with it and, be a lawyer about it. What does it mean to be a lawyer? Try to fudge your way out of it as best as you can sometimes.
Resolve issues. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Take care of the problems for your clients.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's most of the time lawyers are dealing with serious situations and with a lot of pressure. So the
Life,
bar exam is no different.
yeah, yeah. It's one of the unintended consequences of the bar exam.
Right. It's unfortunate, but again, those that actually passed this February 2025 bar exam can be proud of themselves that they actually performed under pressure.
In ways
And
that
ones
others
that
didn't need
didn't
to.
should be proud of themselves as well. Just
Yes.
part of life. Things
Yeah.
happened, and the first thing we start to think, why me? Why me? Why did it happen this year? Not last year, not next year, this year.
Yeah.
There's, there's a way to look at the situation from different perspective and learn what
Yeah.
you can and move on.
Yeah, you draw from your own experiences, don't you? Like this isn't the first time that I've faced severe challenges in my life. How have I dealt with those other challenges? And maybe challenges that you yourself faced or loved ones have faced or the challenges of the world. How do you internalize those challenges and how do you move forward from that? And sometimes it's like moving forward in the moment. Like how do we just like pivot automatically and say, okay, I'm just going to keep my cool and keep doing what I need to do. And one thing that we do is to rely on the fact that we have developed our skills. And that, it's like I said earlier, it's like riding a bike, right? You can trust that there are certain things that are going to stay with you, and you can rely on those skill sets that you worked on developing and take it to the bar, and that will inform your confidence in dealing in the light of adversity.
And I like the fact that you just mentioned that some of your students are calling you for support. It seems
Yeah.
like mentorship. This
That's
relationship has value when you work with the student, when you're working with them to prepare them for the bar exam, the relationship is developed where they
relationships.
can come to you for support and it can be customized for their experience because everyone comes with their different starting point, maybe different law
That's right.
school, different approaches. Everyone has different situation, but to have this custom approach to bar prep, I think it has a lot of value in it, right?
Yes, it really does. It is all about a relationship because after all, I mean, if we're talking about, hey, let's try to build skills that should have been developed during the course of 3 years in the span of 2 to 3 months, we're talking about, are you the person I'm going to trust to do that? So, you can't just come in with, the sound pedagogy. You have to build the trust from that person. So that requires you being let in by them and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and say, look, I'm not here to just teach you and tell you. I want you to ask me. Why are we doing things this way? Why is this so effective? And how does it relate to what I'm supposed to be doing if you don't understand that? I also get down to a personal level with them. What is actually stopping you? I gave a couple of lectures at Berkeley Law School, Santa Clara Law School just this past week. And we talked a bit about that, about how it's important to understand how your own stories impact your performance when it
That's
comes to high stakes scenarios and the lack of confidence that comes with that. I had dealt with that myself. And, the pressures that come from family, that come from yourself. And how do you deal with something like that that will inform your success? So these are things that we talk about all the time, that my student personally and I talk about individually. I don't do classroom stuff because to me, it doesn't you're not going to get the best of a student that way. You're not going to see in a classroom what you can see when they're opening up to you one-on-one, you know, and that's a huge part of their success. The
you can
soft skills
identify, you can actually identify the points that they need to work on, right?
and the
Assess them and
source.
then help them to prepare for
Yeah,
the bar
yeah.
exam.
I like I like to joke that, I wish I had a degree in psychology because, half my job is psychological, right? Is to work them
And this
through the
is probably
psychological
half
path.
of success, right?
It is. It
Like you
really is.
said,
That really makes a
confidence,
difference.
your
It makes a
mindset going into it.
It can be everything. It can be everything for a student. And to know that they're even feeling supported when they're having a breakdown and they don't and there's somebody who's out there who will understand them because that person bothered to get to know them, and it's important. We all need that, especially when we're starting off, right? Imagine, right, when you were starting off, you look toward your mentors to kind of shape you, and I certainly did that too, and I benefited immensely from that, and I carry that forward as best as I can with this younger generation, I think they need it. I think they're dealing with more challenges than I had to deal with in preparing for this. And we see it in the newspapers today, right?
Yeah.
As to what happened.
Yeah, it's definitely
It's a brave new world.
it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have a mentor. I think it's something they don't just come to you. So you would probably encourage students to look for somebody. I remember then I was younger. I had a mentor. He was a judge, and some things that he did are still with me all the time. I remember walking into
Absolutely.
his
Mhm.
office and his desk was so organized. And I'm the same way.
Subtle things of how a good mentor models success for you, as you're describing, is something that I want to be, and I want my colleagues to be. And it's important. If that's what we're expecting them to be and do, we need to be able to model that. And so that's important. Yeah. I mean, we all have stories about those mentors, those teachers, those coaches, whoever it was, the parents, the friends who really modeled what it means to be successful in certain contexts and what you would want to aspire to. And we all need that. And we also need it in terms of, being able to approach them and say, and it seems like this judge that you worked for seemed
Yeah,
approachable and allowed you to learn and
he
allowed
was my
and
professor at the university in Ukraine.
yeah. Yeah, and he wanted you to learn and succeed and not hide the ball and not, deride you and not have time for you. Once you develop that relationship or a foundation in that relationship, the mentor has an incentive to help, right? It's like, well, let me just take you under my wing. I had that benefit as well from a professor in law school, and it really changed
He was
how,
professor and judge. Yeah, I really
yeah.
loved then practicing lawyers teach, because they bring this practical perspective.
That's right.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
amazing.
Which is why I was saying, earlier that, if I were to have that magic wand, they would be involved too, right? When you are kind of speaking this, looking for the same things, which we know we are, but do we talk about it together? Do we sit around and talk about it? Do we understand it? If there were more of a place where we could kind of create a forum for that, collaboratively supporting each student, and there are micro initiatives like that that happen in law school between recruiters and law professors. If we could kind of bridge those gaps and really support students of different backgrounds, I think that would be amazing. And it should just be more common.
Yeah, and going back to what you do, you helping students to prepare for the bar exam. Do you think this new wave of AI, artificial intelligence tools, will impact the way you approach it,
Yeah.
the bar
Um,
prep?
that's a great question. I think, the law academia is very slow to change the way things they do. As you know, in law school, as we talked about, it's through the Socratic method, which has existed during the time of Socrates. And it's been the way to go through with uh, through developing critical. It's the standard for developing critical thinking skills. I think AI is there to change that. And I think that it really enables other skill sets to shine as well. I think it's a good teaching tool. So, what I do with my students is that I encourage them, where to use AI when it comes to legal concepts that they never quite grasped. So, for example, if they would, I'll tell you my story. When I was my first year of law school, I took contracts, as everyone does, contract law. And, you're very optimistic, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when you first start off law school, ready to learn, new environment, new people, new way of thinking. And I opened up my big giant law book, and the first case dealt with an idea called consideration. Consideration for your audience members simply is when two parties come to create a contract in a legally binding agreement, they have to commit. There's got to be some showing of a commitment. And all I read from that case, or all that I grasped from that case, internalized and understood, was what the actual rule for consideration is, which is that a consideration is a bargain for exchange of promises to the party's legal detriment. Now imagine, first week of law school, you hear a sentence like that, and you're like, what does that even mean? It's a bargain for exchange of promises to the party's legal detriment. So, of course, some of the students raise their hand in class and say, Professor, what really does that mean? And he just repeated himself. He wasn't able to actually dumb it down for us. And he said, well, think about the facts of this situation. Do you see how there was a bargain for exchange? And okay, now that we sort of understood this, why would we need to know that? I mean, isn't it just a given that you're going to commit to each other and have a bargain for exchange? He wasn't able to really tell me when I should be able to see that issue. When would it arise in a problem for a client? And that kind of set the stage for
Disconnect, right? It just seems like
disconnected.
those concepts
It
that,
was a
yeah,
completely disconnected. I
floating
didn't know
here,
how to
popping
put
up
it
everywhere. Yeah.
in the real world. When would I need this? On one of your exams, when would I need to talk about this? It never registered. So, unfortunately, that's a common problem where students graduate from law schools, get their Juris Doctorate degrees, and not know when you should be arguing something like that. A concept that you know of, now every law student knows, but what does it really mean and how does it play
How do you
out so that we
apply?
can come to a conclusion for a client? So, what I tell my students in terms of AI is When you have concepts like that, that you see in my book, or you remember from law school, that consideration is a bargain for exchange of promises to the parties, legal detriment, and you don't really understand it because you're going to need to apply it because remember, the law is simply a vehicle for those skill sets of, how does it play out for your client and what's the conclusion for that? Was there a commitment? Was there a consideration in this case to form a legally binding contract? Well, use AI to help you. You can plug in, a simple question. How can I explain the concept of a bargain for exchange of a promise is to legal detriment to a layperson? And if they're able to explain it to a layperson, then that means they themselves have understood that concept. That if you can talk down to somebody who has never been to law school and say, this is what this means, then you have understood it and you're ready to apply it in anyone's case. So that's what we use AI for at this stage in AI's development. AI is great for well-settled principles. And that whole idea of consideration, well, I mean, that's been well settled since the 1800s, at the very least, if not longer. That rule came out in the 1800s that we learned in law school. So you know that information has been written on time and time and time again and put on the internet and grabbed and consolidated, and any sort of explanation based on what is being on that doctrine, on that law, is going to be fairly reliable. And that's what AI right now is really good at, is to work on well-settled principles and to explain it because lawyers put out articles when they're talking about, do you have a contract? And if you look up a lawyer's law website, they put up articles about things, and one could be about that. And they grab that information, and as long as it's been said enough, you can consider it to be reliable. And all bar law is actually pretty well settled information, except for certain bits of constitutional law. So you should be able to use any law that is tested on the bar, plug it into AI, and figure out what it really means so that you're preparing yourself for analysis. So it really helps with the law knowledge piece of preparing for the bar exam. And my students really learn a lot faster that way.
I
Instead
like
of
that
waiting,
because in the law school environment, you will have 100 students sitting in the classroom. Okay, one
that's
person
right,
is brave enough to ask a
to
question.
ask that question.
Yeah,
Yes.
but others still don't understand, right? And then you go back home and it's like, I really want to understand
I
this
really don't
concept, right? And
understand.
so you can use AI to really drill it down.
It's a
Yeah.
brilliant tool for that. Yes.
So how about legal writing? Because
Yes.
legal writing is very important and everyone is trained to, like you said, using IRAC method,
Format. Hmm.
format
Hmm.
of writing. So now AI can draft a memo in seconds, right? That normally
Well,
attorney would spend much more time for the first draft. Of course, what you get from AI, it's not going to be a final version, but maybe basis for that memo that you're working on. Oh,
and that's an important point, right, that you're making. So what goes into giving a good legal analysis when you're drafting a memo to your boss or writing a letter to your client of how the case is going to go for them? What do we really want to make sure you get right? And does AI currently get that right? So one thing is the IRAC format. Sure, there's a science to that. You can teach how to start off with, first, I want you to put in what the problem the client is facing, then given the set of the rules, and then the analysis for that, and then the conclusion. Yes, you can teach it that pretty fairly easily. But what about the content? Are they seeing the right problems? Could you plug in the client's factual scenario and see the right problems? Well, studies have shown that it actually is not really
not
good at
yet.
issue spotting at this point in time. That it might spot the major problems that the client is facing. But maybe a lot of these problems that, that you're not sure you should argue or you shouldn't, whether those problems
Will
belong on the
benefit your
page.
client, right?
Yeah. So how do you decide that? That does take a human right now. A human, and we know this about lawyers as well. What's the difference between a good lawyer and a great lawyer? It's going to be, could they see the problems that the client is facing and try to argue it and spin it, right? And yes, AI can give you that to a degree, um, with the issue spotting. But then when it comes to the rule statements, and lawyers apparently have tried to submit rules with citations, and there have been fake citations that were submitted in court that were never verified by the lawyer, and that there weren't actually real cases that held that way, that found in a certain way, and the entire analysis would have depended on it, and therefore it was junk law. So right now there are tools that AI could be that can be used to support the doctrines, especially if you're a lawyer who is new to a certain doctrine or the way things work. You could use AI as like a basis for understanding that area of law, and then using it then as to get your primary sources in a more solid, legally sound way. So right now, it's not it may be used by legal search engines as a way to kind of assemble law for you. And definitely it's going to go that way with Lexis and Westlaw, which is the Google for lawyers,
Yeah.
when they're looking for all sorts of law, for your audience who doesn't is not familiar with that. And then the analysis, though, is where we see AI having a lot of trouble. Some of your audience members might remember there was AI took the bar exam, the uniform bar exam, a couple of years ago, and apparently it scored in the 90th percentile of all the bar applicants who took that particular exam. And so it passed the uniform bar exam, not the California bar, but the uniform bar exam, which tests the skill sets differently. And so where did it not do well? It did not do well in the writing portion of the exam.
Mm.
And they were not able to, it did well on the multiple choice. It was GPT-4 that attempted the bar exam, a former iteration of ChatGPT, and it did not perform well on the bar exam with when it came to the written portion. Why? It's because it wasn't able to do the skills that we're talking about here, the analytical skills. I tell my students when you're writing for the bar exam, it's just like it's intended to be like real life. You're not just going to work with the facts that are right there in front of you, but you got to see the circumstances of the client situation. And that is secretly built into the way these questions are drafted. And if you can't see those circumstances, you're not going to give a well thought out analysis. You're looking too myopically as to how this is going to get resolved. This legal problem is going to get resolved. So AI hasn't quite gotten there to kind of read the subtle background in a factual scenario as tested on the bar exam. And so there is a ways to go. There are ideas that I have about that. I think that, analysis is an art, right? Artistically, can you come up with a good argument? There's an art to an argument where, you kind of draw from certain details and emphasize certain details like an artist does. And then there are things that you really de-emphasize to your advantage to prove your point. And that's the art of lawyering. But I do think that there is a science to lawyering as well. And I teach my students, especially those who really have a difficulty grasping the art of lawyering, simply because they're not used to performing the art, right? You don't go from doing something that's a stick figure to Rembrandt in one go, right? So how do you build that? Well, there's a science. There are techniques that are involved. So I teach them about the science of constructing a legal argument, that there's a formulaic way to argue. And if you actually use this formula for the art that you're trying to display, then you should be able to more often than not include the right analysis for a legal argument. And I feel that this is something that if it were harnessed properly, that AI would be able to do. If there was a good understanding of that science of arguing, the science of analysis, of performing a legal analysis, which is very fact-driven, based on the facts of a scenario, a very unique scenario where the story is half told to you and not entirely told, where you have to draw from the circumstances. And if that were harnessed, I think AI would do a much better job with legal analysis. So the devil's in the details. So right now, I think we're starting to see, where it goes. And of course, the natural place for AI to excel is where humans currently think lawyering excels, which is to know the law. But can it make a Johnny Cochran, like, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit type of analysis, which is brilliant, which is what contributed
Yeah,
to the
gold
success of
standard.
the dream team. Can it? I don't think so, not yet.
It's interesting what you're saying about using AI for the bar prep. I believe that for lawyering, there's too many risks involved, confidentiality issues, privacy. So
Mhm.
definitely one should be extremely careful about using any AI tools.
We got to be careful with the ethical considerations of it, client privacy. That is the paramount duty that we have as lawyers, and what we do with that information and what sort of information that a client wants us to share and what not to share and how to share it. These are things that, this is what, legal professionals will have to grapple with. But yes, as aides, there are tools that are available to lawyers now already, in the field of legal research and document review, where they're able to kind of go through with much greater speed and fairly decent accuracy with collecting information during the discovery phase of litigation, and knowing what information is relevant to what things need to be proved in different cases, what aspects of the to satisfy the burden of proof against an opposing party. So there is a lot of streamlining that AI is doing.
I would like our Bonafide Dialogues community to get to know you better. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe if you could talk a little bit about your hobbies or what do you enjoy doing outside of your work? And your work is very important. You're helping so many people in building their careers, their future. But what about you?
Yeah. Thanks for asking about me. Yeah, I love somehow building life. So I have two kids, and we every opportunity that I take them somewhere different, take them on vacation. So I love to travel, and I always have. This is something that I get from my parents, and we like to just kind of have experiences. So we like to keep life simple so that, when it comes to materialism, but when it comes to experiences, my mantra is don't hold back. And so I try to bring that to my kids, and that's what I live life for, is to kind of have, just lots of travel experiences, and give them whatever, give them a love for life from that angle.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yes, traveling is interesting because you experience different cultures
Oh,
and
yes.
just
Yeah.
amazing.
I like to I'm trying to get them, we're all built differently and we have different interests. So I don't try to impose my values on them so much. But for me, I speak several languages. Language is a great way to kind of get
Connect.
yourself to understand where people are coming from, and how they think and what makes them tick. And so I really want to see my kids love the value of what learning a new language can even offer. And maybe it will be an AI instructor for them someday.
Yes,
Or for me, for more languages, but you never know.
definitely. I usually ask my guests about kindness. We always talk about all these problems in life, discussing some um, challenges, trying to come up with solutions. But I think it's wonderful sometimes to step back and think about good things, about human hearts, and about kindness. What does kindness mean to you?
Oh, yes, this is a big question, and this is what we always want our kids to lead with. I always see kindness as in a way of recognizing, it's the recognition of the fact that each of us walks on a unique tightrope, and that tightrope is created out of different materials, which are your experiences, how you view life, and how life views you, and how those who surround you have shaped you. And kindness is the understanding of that and being able to support one another when we know that some of those fabrics are fraying, and understand that even though it wasn't our tightrope and that we haven't walked the same journey, but that there are ways for us to step in and help mend those fraying strings in that tightrope. And so I think it's really about showing up at the end of the day, showing up for each other, even when we really don't know what it feels like to be working through whatever that person is, in whatever way we can, and that's what I hope to bring in professionally and teach my kids personally as well, and live by that and just show up for those who, no matter how different they are from you,
I
and
love
what
that.
they've dealt with and what you're dealing with.
I love that. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time,
Thank you,
Jay.
Christina.
Was
Yeah, it's been
amazing.
a
We'll have to
pleasure.
connect again,
Yes, absolutely. I'm
and
always
see if
available
the
to you.
progress of this bar
Yes,
exam journey that seems like revolution right now.
the saga continues, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's
Good
a big
luck.
soap
Good luck
opera.
to all your
Thank you.
students and
Thank you.
all the
You
best.
say